Hi. I'm Amy Vernon. You got a brief introduction of everyone, so we were going to do that, but I think we could probably just skip over that part. The panel came together, actually, because Kat and I were out with a friend of ours who's in the audience here somewhere, Andre, and we were talking about an experience that Kat had had, and I was trying to think about, what I would talk about here at Propelify this year. And we looked at each other and we're like, oh, this is really the perfect topic, because we're very, even though we've been in marketing and comms a lot, it's very much about what the customer experience is, and we're really big on listening to the user, the customer, member, whatever you want to call them. So, Kat, if you would just give like the 5-minute version of the story that led to us being here today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, personal story, but I am going through a divorce. A lot of people do that, and reached back out to the company I got with. They do conflict-free diamonds and recycled metals, and I'm such a huge fan of them and have sent many people their way over the years.
Just hold it closer to your mouth. Yeah.
And, send them a message and trying to figure out, like, if they could recycle it or, put it to good use. And sent them a message, had my name, had my phone number, had my email address, had a message. And they responded to my ex. Just gonna, let that happen a moment. And I reached out to them, and they apologized. And that was just the default message, right? We'll be back to you in a few days. And then they responded to him again. And I was angry. I was really angry. And I did end up having a conversation with someone in the ops department there. And we both cried and talked about how, to be honest, we'd both been in unsafe marriages. And it felt really important. But, I've been someone that's been putting in marketing technology and CRMs for years. And it was that exact thing that had gone wrong for me. And in my case, I was pretty fortunate. It was just like a misfire. But in another case, someone could have died. So that was the story I told that night with Amy and our friend Andre that's sitting over there. And kind of led to the beginning of this panel. Yeah.
Because what we were talking about in that was the idea that it was really just set up as a one-size-fits-all, and it was like her ex's email was the one that they had as the primary one on the account, and so it's just, the marketing automation, you get an email about it, and by default, it's just spitting it back out without actual thought as to why are people potentially getting in touch with us? Who is getting in touch? Maybe, it even could have been that she was looking to, surprise her husband with a gift with an additional ring or something. It could have ruined a surprise. It could have, as Kat said, if it had been a really dangerous situation, someone could have ended up dead. And so we're talking about it. It's like listening to the user and really understanding. And what the base of this is, and that's when we started talking to Gary, is there's a lot of lip service given to diversity initiatives in a lot of companies right now. And now there's even more lip service given to the word inclusion, though no one ever actually means it the way what inclusion actually means. So what we wanted to do next was have Gary talk about cases that he's encountered where the experience is completely out of step with what the customer, consumer, audience is actually looking for.
Yeah, so I basically come from the evil world of marketing. I say that all the time because I've been marketing for 23 years. But one thing that I've seen in the past couple of years is that this whole thing about diversity, we're looking at it completely wrong. Because diversity is the kind of the visual part of it, right? If you are already inclusive, you will become diverse by definition, because the inclusion is the consideration of other people's experiences, other people's cultures, and the like. You know, so that's one of the big parts. I mean, I could sit here and talk probably for 3 hours with examples of people getting diversity wrong. I know everyone in here has probably seen one picture of a panel about diversity with the least diverse panel ever, right? While we were waiting, I just saw news about a certain technological company who was using facial recognition software, or training its facial recognition software on homeless people so that they could learn, so that the technology could learn how to read and recognize darker skin tones. Like, there's so many examples of getting diversity wrong, and even just switching your thinking about being more inclusive and what that means to your business, what that means to your company, what that means to your brand, what that means to the money that you're trying to make. One simple turn right there will go a long way in fixing the issue.
And what we were talking about too is the fact that, there is this conversation about diversity and inclusion, but why is that important? It's like, but having those voices in house, what difference does that make?
Yeah, and I mean, having the representation of the people that you're trying to sell to, I mean, I can't figure out why people don't understand why that's important. I mean, if you want to sell to everybody, right, you should have representation and the voice of everybody, because they can tell you certain things that you will miss just because of things that you haven't experienced. You know, empathy is great. Empathy can take you only but so far, because you have to understand certain experiences to understand what to do and what not to do. And if you haven't gone through that, that doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes you someone who can't do that because you haven't experienced it. Right? So it's not bad that you haven't experienced something, but it's bad if you're keeping the people away who have experienced it, or trying to say that they don't know what they're talking about or something along those lines. That's where the problem actually comes about.
Right. And that was the case that we were talking about with Kat, where that was not something that anyone thought about at all. And by having those different voices in the room, you start thinking of potential problems and issues that you're not going to think about when you just have a whole room full of everybody who looks the same. So Kat asked Peter to be on the panel, and when we were having the conversation, it was really a great example. And it's funny because Peter is not in marketing. He is not a marketer. He doesn't play one on TV or anything. But Peter's story is really, I think, just amazing, because it shows the power of having those diverse voices in the room and how it actually can affect your bottom line. So Peter, I'd like for you to tell everybody what you told us when we had our, once the helicopter finishes going overhead.
It's all right, I get real loud.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, so I joined this company called Agio about 4 months ago. I've been in cybersecurity, tracking hackers and handling people's breaches. I'm actually doing a run right now, so forgive this. For a couple of decades. I've also been in the closet since I was 17, until around the same time I joined Agio about 4 months ago. And I came into a company that is that depends on secrets and trust, We deal with, for the most part, private equity and hedge funds. And if you know that space, you know that people are paranoid and should be. And so we're faced with a situation where we need to build trust with people who are not inclined to give it, so that we can protect their secrets. What it means is that I can't have them for me. I can't have my own secrets because I got to protect yours. And there's too many secrets to be able to manage. So another thing I find is that, like most companies, not everybody's willing to be open and transparent, just out of habit, mostly to protect themselves because they don't feel protected. And they don't feel like that there is the kind of tone at the top stuff and the example from the executive suite. And I found myself landing as a managing director in the executive team of this company. And so there was an announcement that had to be made about this new person coming in. And in the announcement, I wrote some things about me, some facts, a little bit of my story. And then I looked at it again, and I looked at the header, the top part, and I thought, do I say it? And I added a line that said, Peter Schwacker, blah, 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 from here, was born there, is a queer cis male, his pronouns are he and him. And in this company of about 300 people started to come out of the woodwork. And what they found was there was somebody who sat on the executive team who was willing to say it, and who wasn't going to keep that secret. And my team had changed completely in the way it interacted with each other and with customers. And we're able to take on a sense of caring about their mission in a different way that was more personal, and then went on to the customer. And so what we found is their interactions with customers are much more fruitful and much more honest. And I think that was the story.
Yeah. And so, and that was what I found really interesting, was that it actually did change, not just internally and how everybody interacted with each other, but that it actually affected positively how your company interacted with the customer.
Right. I mean, it wasn't just about the employees and LGBTQ people
Right.
coming out of the woodwork, which they did. It was that there was somebody in a position of authority and power who was willing to risk that power for them, which then serves as an example so that they could take some risks emotionally, intellectually, and get down to what really matters, which is what people feel about their own safety and their security, and those are all very closely related.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you said, I mean, in your industry, you need that trust from your clients, otherwise you don't have them as your clients.
Well, and we typically interact with them when they're experiencing the worst moments of their career. I mean, I deal with companies that a week later I know the company's not going to exist and people's lives are going to be ruined. And yet, for the next 12, 24, 72 hours, they have to come together as a team and operate with a higher level of effectiveness and trust with each other than they ever have before, or else they wouldn't have gotten a position that they were in. Mm-hmm. And so in terms of what the customer wants and what they need, that's when it comes down. When they've been doing everything wrong and suddenly they have to do everything right, and they got to listen to somebody who's willing to tell the truth without regard for necessarily their own well-being. Now, I survive. They don't always. But this is the situation we find ourselves in.
Right. Kat and Gary, I want to talk a little bit about your experiences in fixing those problems, and where you've seen that understanding and those voices brought forth, where it actually has helped.
So I think for me, I like kicking doors down.
I've noticed.
So I've also been described as a marketing orthopedist. I break things that need to be broken so it gets fixed the right way. So just kind of having that kind of thing, just like, okay, look, here's the problem. Do you actually want to solve it? Yes, you want to solve it? Okay, here are the things we need to do. Oh, you don't want to do these things. Let's go back to the first question. Do you want to solve the problem? Yes. Okay, well, I'm telling you how to solve the problem, and you don't want to do it. So do you want to solve the problem? Yes, I want to solve the problem. Okay, then do this. Oh, well, we don't want to. we can do this all day if you really want to. And once they figure out whether they want to solve the problem, then things get a lot easier. Once people start getting out of their own way and they start thinking about other people and they start like tapping into their own empathy and deciding to actually just listen, then you can go ahead and stop working off of models that worked a long time before, because technology did not have that distribution of voice thing that's breaking everything right now. So once you realize the real problem and accept there's a problem and accept that you want to fix it, that does help a lot.
Yeah, I would say for me, in terms of like putting in the marketing technology, my example is probably such a small set, right? It's not something that's going to happen all the time, but it's clearly something that could happen.
Right.
And so when you're putting in your CRM, when you're putting in your Salesforce or whatever solution you're using, like, you kind of have to be sitting around the table, right? And thinking about what are the kinds of, when our customers are contacting us, like, what are they really going to be contacting us about? Like, how are we going to make sure that we are going to be handling how we answer to them in an appropriate way? There are lots of other things that I could answer as well, but just sticking to that particular.
How do you get those voices at the table? I mean, obviously we talked about diversity and inclusion, and we talked about it as an issue, and we have limited time here, but how do you get those voices at the table?
Man, I think you just really have to push. I think, for so many companies, diversity and inclusion is a one and done session that you do once a year or once every couple of years, and then you think you're done. And that's just not the case. I think either your company, whether, it's your own company that you're running or building, or, maybe it's somewhere that you're working and like, you're putting in a voice and making it happen. It is something that has to be pushed from the executive suite, or it's not going to change. And that's definitely something that, Peter was touching on. Yeah. It can't be a one and done. The work doesn't end.
Yeah.
And I think one other thing is that companies that don't understand that they need to have these open seats at the table, they have to, instead of fearing what's going to happen at that table if you bring these people in, they need to start worrying about the other tables that will end up being built that will take them over.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing that's going to happen. Your company is going to break down, and something, whether it's directly from the people inside or from somewhere outside, is going to be built on top of the rubble of what you just lost. So if you want to fear something, that's what you need to fear, not fear what's going to happen if you try to fix things.
We have only a couple of minutes left, so I definitely did want to take any questions that there might be from the audience. I know there's a lot more that we could talk about, but we have a limited time.
Oh, sorry. One, you don't have to worry about being the bad guy. Remember what you're there for. If you're there to fix a problem, you're there to fix the problem. So if they call you the bad guy for trying to fix their problem, they're thinking wrong. So what you're actually doing is being the good guy. You're doing what's supposed to be done. So don't worry about what them thinking that you're bad because you're trying to fix their problem. That's literally what they're supposed to be paying you for. So that's not even something to worry about, really, for me.
I think if they think you're the bad guy, that's their in the end that's their problem, because then they're not going to fix the problem.
If I may.
Yeah.
You prepare for the emergency, you identify the emergency, and then you exploit the emergency. The day-to-day work that we do, the grind, is preparation for when everything breaks down, and then there is no bad guy. you must work together at that point. And I think it's the dual activity of the preparation, the fighting even though you're not winning, because at some point there's a moment when it becomes possible for people to actually work together.
Well, think about it from the opposite perspective. Think about spoiling a surprise. Think about the exact same example where it's going in the opposite direction, right? So, take it out of that lens. But there's certainly plenty of examples where we got to start having the conversation, and brands have to have a voice and have to step up. Certainly where we are today. Absolutely. Companies are just as responsible. Yeah.
Yeah, I know we've run out of time. I know that folks on here, except for Peter, since he is in the middle of a security breach emergency, Gary and Kat and I would be happy to talk to folks outside if you have any other questions for them. But thank you all for coming.